Legal Eagle is coming in loud and clear thanks to Ting Mobile. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays postal workers from their jobs, but they never met President Donald Trump. And now is there a postal conspiracy to slow down mail to affect the 2020 election? 2020 will go down in history as a year dominated by the coronavirus pandemic. But in case you haven't noticed, we also have a major election coming up in just a few short months. And COVID-19 spreads easily between people who are in close contact indoors, so states are scrambling for alternatives to packing people into polling places like sardines. And people are worried, so this has led to a shortage of poll workers. The best solution, according to the Centers for Disease Control, is to increase voting by mail. And I have an entire video devoted to voting by mail and the potential for mail fraud, if there is one. But consistent with the CDC's recommendation, several states have expanded the ability of voters to vote absentee or by mail. As a result of these changes, a record 76% of American voters will be eligible to receive a ballot in the mail for the November 2020 election. Now, it's not entirely clear because he flip-flops, but it appears that President Trump is against voting by mail.
Now, they need that money in order to have the post office work so it can take all of these millions and millions of ballots. But if they don't get those two items, that means you can't have universal mail-in voting.
And we can only speculate as to why that is. And into this mess jumped new Postmaster General Louis DeJoy. The man with the surname that sounds like it should be a candy bar is making sweeping changes at the Postal Service. These changes include reducing staff, taking away blue mailboxes, prohibiting overtime, and raising postage on ballots, and throwing away mail sorters, which this reporter caught on video.
We are at the USPS Patterson location, where behind me you can see a graveyard of mail sorting pieces. They're just large pieces of machinery that have been yanked out. In addition to that, there's also a dumpster right there. And according to an employee that works across the way, they tell me that that dumpster has been filled 3 times since last week with parts and pieces of what we're being told are the mail sorting machines.
The Postal Service has now warned that states may not be able to deliver ballots in time for the November election, or deliver the ballots that are in fact cast. And despite the fact that President Trump has tweeted that we should save the post office, though not recognizing that he's sort of the guy in charge, it appears that President Trump is opposed to increasing funding for the USPS and ensuring that ballots are delivered on time. Coincidence or conspiracy? Hey Legal Eagles, it's time to think like a lawyer because the USPS may hang in the balance. Today we're going to take a close look at what's happening at the Postal Service. Is Louis DeJoy deliberately trying to impact the outcome of the election by slowing down the mail? And if so, can he be stopped? But first, let's talk about the actual structure of the US Post Office. The USPS delivers 40% of the world's mail. However, COVID-19 caused a significant reduction in letter mail, which is the most profitable mail processed by the post office. And the COVID-19 crisis could not have happened at a worse time for the US Post Office. The volume of letter mail has been decreasing for quite some time, mostly due to the availability of email and other options for communicating quickly. To understand the current issues, we have to review the basic legal structure of the US Post Office. The Post Office was established in 1775, and the US Post Office was actually a cabinet-level agency until 1970, when Congress passed the Postal Reorganization Act, which established the United States Postal Service as a quasi-independent, self-funded organization. President George W. Bush signed the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act in 2006. The PEA was the first broad revision of the 1970 statute. The PEA imposed several new requirements on how the Postal Service is allowed to conduct its business. Section 101 of the PEA defines postal service to mean the delivery of letters, printed matter, or mailable packages, including acceptance, collection, sorting, transportation, or other functions ancillary thereto. This section of the law clarifies and limits what the Postal Service can do. Prior to this law, the post office used to sell things like prepaid phone cards, for example, but this practice ended after the PEA because the sale of prepaid phone cards did not fit within this definition. This was good news for the post office's competitors, but bad news for the post office's ability to self-fund. And Section 102 of the law is a blanket prohibition on new products that aren't mail. Several postmaster generals have complained that the Postal Service isn't permitted to legally offer banking, cell phone, logistics, and other services the postal services in other countries use to generate the income necessary to offset the costs of their universal service obligation. Senator Bernie Sanders has suggested that the post office be allowed to provide basic banking services.
Postal Service can make billions of dollars a year by establishing basic banking services so that lower income people have access.
But this can't happen without congressional intervention. Under Title II of the PAEA, the Postal Service can only offer two categories of products: market-dominant products and competitive products. The Postal Service's market-dominant products include things like first-class mail letters, first-class mail cards, and media mail. With these monopolistic products, the USPS can only increase prices in accordance with the Consumer Price Index. This keeps the rates down for consumers but contributes to the Postal Service's insolvency. But given the USPS has a monopoly on these products, there's a reason why you don't necessarily want the prices to increase too dramatically. But competitive products include those for which a competitive market already exists. Those include things like priority mail, expedited mail, and bulk parcel post. For these competitive products, the post office is barred from offering prices lower than the cost of delivery. So this means that the USPS can't undercut FedEx and USPS by offering dramatically lower prices that are below the cost of actually delivering. And again, this benefits consumers but hurts the post office's ability to fund itself or offer loss leaders. The PAEA also established the Postal Service Retiree Health Benefits Fund. Section 801 to 803 of the PAEA changed the USPS from funding its retirees' healthcare costs on a pay-as-you-go basis to pre-funding these obligations. The upshot of this is that the post office had to create a $72 billion fund to pay for the cost of its post-retirement healthcare costs. And the fact that the Postal Service has to pre-fund its retirement obligations from a separate account hampers its financial prospects. And this pre-funding burden applies to no other federal agency and no private employer. Now, the PAEA also created the Postal Regulatory Commission. Now, the PRC, no relation, has significant powers, but it also has to follow the requirements of the Administrative Procedures Act, or APA. We've talked about the APA a lot on this channel, but it governs the process by which federal agencies develop regulations. It includes requirements for publishing notices of proposed and final rulemaking in the Federal Register, and provides opportunities for the public to comment on notices of proposed rulemaking. The APA also requires most rules to have a 30-day delayed effective date. The APA provides standards for judicial review if a person has been adversely affected or aggrieved by an agency action. So, if the Postal Rate Commission made sweeping changes without following the APA, and spoiler alert, they did, these changes could be rolled back by a federal court. And as an aside, a lot of people ask, why doesn't the Postal Service run like a business? And many people have argued that the post office isn't profitable. They claim that if it was any other business, like the Trump Taj Mahal, it would have declared bankruptcy because it couldn't turn a profit. And in fact, Trump appointee Richard Grenell says that the post office should just charge you a lot more to send letters and packages to make the USPS profitable. And Senator Rand Paul says that rural citizens, such as many of the people that he represents in Kentucky, should just settle for receiving the mail just 3 days a week. And those changes could help make the Postal Service more profitable. But the Postal Service has a legal mandate to provide universal service to all U.S. addresses without charging more for more costly delivery routes. And this is known as the Universal Service Obligation, or USO. The USO is not clearly defined in legislation, but it's pieced together from numerous laws and regulations. And the basic obligations of the Postal Service are defined in 39 U.S.C. sections 101 and 403. These statutes require the post office to provide a range of product offerings, maintain uniform prices and availability, provide efficient services to people in every geographic location in the U.S., and make its facilities accessible to everyone. Congress gave the post office a monopoly on mail service in exchange for providing all of these service benefits to the American people uniformly in both price and service. And under 39 U.S.C. section 404D, small post offices may not be, quote, closed solely for operating at a deficit. If the post office was legally allowed to operate like any other business, it could eliminate thousands of unprofitable post offices in rural areas. It could cut services to rural citizens. It could only deliver the mail 3 days a week, and it could charge much more for different service routes. Now, like many crises during the Trump era, these problems began long before President Trump took office, but the president has exploited some of these issues and accelerated them. The Board of Governors of the USPS is responsible for overseeing the activities of the Postal Service, while the Postmaster General actively manages its day-to-day operations. A Postmaster General is not appointed by the president. Instead, the Board of Governors chooses a new person only when there is a vacancy. And the Board of Governors is designed to be as nonpartisan as possible. For this reason, no more than 5 members can be members of the same political party. However, right now there are only 6 members of the Board of Governors, and all 6 of them were appointed by President Trump. The other vacancies have not been filled, presumably because President Trump is required by law to appoint Democrats. The Board of Governors has not been fully staffed since 2010 because Senate Republicans refused to confirm 5 nominees by President Obama. In April, the USPS notified Congress that it was running out of money, and in May, Republican donor Louis DeJoy was named Postmaster General by the now 6 members of the Board of Governors. President Trump asked his nominees, who are the only people on the board, board to appoint DeJoy. They did so despite his lack of experience at the Postal Service. He's the first Postmaster General ever to have zero experience with the USPS. He was most recently the financial chairman of the Republican National Committee. DeJoy hasn't divested himself of his financial holdings in a logistics company that does business with the Postal Service. He also went out and purchased Amazon stock after his nomination as Postmaster General, which is a potential red flag for conflict of interest. And speaking of Amazon, the company does have a great deal with the USPS. The retail giant focuses its own delivery network on densely populated urban areas, which keeps its costs low. However, this means that the Postal Service, which is required to serve everyone, effectively winds up subsidizing Amazon delivery to low population density areas, the addresses that it wouldn't be profitable for Amazon to deliver to, which coincidentally are very, very red counties across the country. And ironically, Republicans, including President Trump, have criticized the Amazon deal as being bad for business. And in spite of, or perhaps because of this relationship with Amazon, President Trump has disagreed with various Democratic proposals to increase funding for the post office. So let's talk about the recent changes that DeJoy brought to the US Postal Service. On July 10th, DeJoy announced a major operational pivot, which imposes new significant restrictions on the timing and nature of letter carrier routes. DeJoy admitted that this would cause delays in a memo where he said, "We may see mail left behind or mail on the workroom floor," which is not typical. And just to be clear, DeJoy also says he didn't make any of these controversial changes.
Could you please tell me who did order these changes if U.S. Postmaster General did not?
There were many executives, almost 30,000 executives within the organization. And there are plans that existed prior to my arrival that were implemented.
But postal workers have been trained not to leave letters behind and make multiple trips to ensure timely distribution of the mail. This is why they sometimes make unscheduled deliveries or deliver mail on a Sunday. DeJoy now says that carriers should leave this mail behind for the next day, which may accumulate and pile up as time goes on. In addition, letter carriers are now prohibited from sorting mail in the morning and delivering it in the afternoon. Instead, they will get to the routes earlier in the morning and then return to their posts to sort mail in the afternoon. And some of these policies directly affect ballot delivery. On July 29th, the USPS General Counsel announced a policy change directly targeting ballots. The letters said that the ballots sent by marketing mail would not be accorded first-class mail treatment and thus take longer to deliver. The Postal Service had previously trained its employees to give first-class treatment to ballots and any other election-related materials sent as marketing mail. This change imposes much bigger financial burdens on states, which will now have to pay 55 cents per piece for first-class delivery rather than the 20 cents per piece they previously paid. States are already anticipating huge increases in requests for ballots. This comes at a time when state budgets are completely in shambles because of COVID-19. In addition, postal clerks can no longer provide a witness signature on ballots. In some states, you need a third-party witness when you sign a mailed ballot. And the ballots typically say that voters can simply go to the post office and have a worker watch them sign. That this practice is now ended. And one of the most baffling measures has been the decommissioning of 10% of the mail sorting machines at Postal Service centers. These machines can sort 30,000 pieces of mail per hour. And although DeJoy said that he would stop doing this, they've already decommissioned 95% of the machines that were planned to be disconnected. In August, DeJoy ordered the Postal Service to remove 671 mail sorting machines by the end of September, including 24 in Ohio, 11 in Detroit, 11 in Florida, 9 in Wisconsin, 8 in Philadelphia, and 5 in Arizona. What's interesting about these states is that these just happen to be states which are expected to decide the outcome of the presidential election. And DeJoy, who claims he didn't make these changes, has a firm opinion on whether he would ever reverse them.
Mr. DeJoy, will you commit to reversing these changes?
No.
These actions have already spurred nationwide mail delays in mail collection, mail sorting, and mail delivery. At a mail processing facility in Santa Clarita in July, workers discovered that their automated sorting machines had been disabled and padlocked. At a large mail sorting facility in Los Angeles, workers told the LA Times that they are so far behind processing packages that by early August, gnats and rodents were swarming around containers of rotted fruit and meat. And a brief warning to animal lovers, there were even some packages containing small animals which perished in their boxes. In Southeast Washington, D.C., residents have gone weeks without receiving any mail.
People have medical supplies that are delivered by the mail. They have utility bills, they have important financial documents,
which they are not receiving. And I can say personally that one of the mailboxes that has been in my own neighborhood in Washington, D.C., which has been there for years, if not decades, was recently removed just a few weeks ago, and I've never received an explanation why. There have been many reports of veterans and elderly citizens who rely on mail delivery of their medication going through delays, and entire Native American tribes in California haven't received mail for weeks. So not surprisingly, this has created all kinds of legal battles. Voters, states, advocacy groups, and candidates are suing the Trump administration over changes at the Postal Service. The NAACP filed a lawsuit against DeJoy and Trump. The NAACP's main cause of action is that the Postal Service ignored the Postal Reorganization Act by failing to seek an advisory opinion from the PRC under 39 U.S.C. Section 3661. Before implementing changes that have a nationwide impact on mail delivery, the Postal Service has to provide an opportunity for public comment and seek an advisory opinion from the Postal Rate Commission. The opinion may not issue until the commission provides an opportunity for a public hearing. And here, it's undisputed that the Postal Service failed to do so with respect to either the pivot or the change in treatment of ballots sent by marketing mail. And Congress also mandates that the Postal Service shall give the highest consideration to the requirement for the most expeditious collection, transportation, and delivery of important letter mail. The NAACP argues that the Postal Service's reversal of its policy of according first-class service to ballots sent by marketing mail is inconsistent with that statutory mandate. And it's also obvious that DeJoy's changes violated the APA. The biggest question is whether a court will order him to reverse course and remediate the steps that have already been taken. Others argue that this violates the Elections Clause and the Electors Clause of the Constitution. Pennsylvania, Maine, California, Delaware, the District of Columbia, Massachusetts, and North Carolina have filed a lawsuit against the federal government, raising many of the same claims as the NAACP. In addition, the states allege that DeJoy's actions are unconstitutional under the Elections Clause. The Constitution's Elections Clause vests authority in the states to regulate the, quote, time, place, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives that will represent the state. But only Congress may displace how a state has chosen to regulate the time, place, and manner of a federal election. The Constitution's Electors Clause vests authority in the states to appoint, quote, a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in Congress. The plaintiff states here allege that they have exercised these rights by expanding voting by mail. When they passed legislation that expanded vote by mail, they relied on the Postal Service's long history in delivering election mail in a timely manner. They contend that DeJoy's abrupt changes interfere with the constitutional power given to the states to control their own elections. And other alleged violations of the First and 14th Amendments. Certain voters have sued the Trump administration and DeJoy's actions, arguing that they are being denied their right to vote. In these suits, the plaintiffs allege that the way that DeJoy is managing the Postal Service will stop some voters from voting at all, which would be a severe burden. Plaintiffs include people who have medical conditions that make COVID-19 especially dangerous, and people who live in remote areas and cannot travel long distances to vote in person. And theoretically, if a burden would essentially deny a person the right to vote, then it could be considered unconstitutional, though others would argue that everyone faces some burden in voting. It's simply a spectrum here. But the plaintiffs in these suits say that the government doesn't have any real state interest in making the dramatic changes, and the only interest that Postmaster DeJoy has identified is cost saving and efficiency. Plaintiffs argue that while cost saving is important in government in many ways, it's settled law that constitutional rights cannot be taken away because it's too expensive to grant them. In addition, the Postal Service's mandate to serve as an affordable public service seems to clash with the idea that cost savings should interfere with constitutional rights. The plaintiffs also note that the president's stated justification for denying post office funding, his own political fortunes, is obviously not the kind of legitimate government interest that would justify a burden on voters and candidates. But some of the damage has already been done, and unfortunately the courts will be relatively slow to act. And reports continue that the Postal Service is removing blue postal boxes all over the country. If you see this happening, you should report it immediately. And to do that, you'll need really good cell coverage. And Ting Mobile is just the cellular service to report governmental misconduct. Ting provides great LTE coverage because it partners with the biggest carriers. So you get the benefit of 3 massive networks wherever you go, no matter which part of the state you live in. And these days, the smartphone with a camera is the greatest tool we have against government oppression. And Ting Mobile lets you send those videos of government corruption quickly and efficiently. Because Ting Mobile is a different kind of mobile provider. With Ting, you only pay for the actual data and services that you use at the end of the month. And because you're paying for only what you actually use, Ting customers pay on average just $23 per month for one device. And with Ting, you can use almost any cell phone, including the newest iPhones and Pixel phones. And you can use the same phone number you're using right now. There's no contract, overage fees, or any other carrier tricks. You just pay a fair price for the talk, text, and data that you use up at the end of the month. And Ting has award-winning award-winning customer support. Because they don't have any brick and mortar stores, they pour all their resources into their phone and online support. If you have any issues, you can just pick up the phone, call them, and immediately talk to a real human being. With Ting, especially if you're around Wi-Fi all the time, which most of us are considering we're working from home, which is why we need to vote by mail in the first place, you end up paying less than you do now. Of course, some people should pay $200 a month for unlimited data if they're nowhere near their homes or Wi-Fi, but if you're surrounded by a Wi-Fi network all day long, you might be paying hundreds of dollars more completely unnecessarily. And Ting gives you the option to pay only for what you use. So if you go to LegalEagle.ting.com, you can use your last bill to compare just how much you would save. And LegalEagles will get a $25 credit by going to LegalEagle.ting.com, and that could cover your entire first month of service. And since there are no contracts, you can try it for a month, no strings attached. Again, all you have to do is click on the link in the description or go to LegalEagle.ting.com and get a $25 credit for whatever service you want. Plus, clicking on that link really helps out this channel. So, do you agree with my analysis? Do you think that the USPS is being destroyed from the inside? Leave your objections in the comments and check out the playlist over here with all of my other real law reviews talking about all of the crazy things that's happening in the government on the run up to election. So that's fun. So click on this playlist and I'll see you in court.